Greetings. This is the Chapter 3 discussion. Again, going to try to keep it brief as a reminder for myself, not so much as for you guys. Really, there's only one concept I truly wanted to express here, and this is a big basis of my own personal research and how I view public speaking that might differ a little bit from how some of my colleagues in public speaking here and at universities across the world might view public speaking. I'm going to walk you through step by step in this and just explain, briefly. So step one for chapter 3 discussion is um, I'm looking for you to select a narrative. I will provide an example for the narrative speech. You might have already seen it at the end of your speech of introduction. I want you to select song lyrics, a short story. Ideally, this will be something that you have not written. I do have students who share their own stories, and that's perfectly fine. There's obviously, I'm not going to mark you down, but I would like you to not spend a lot of time preparing the script. That's not my objective here. I want to move you up comfortably to a 3 to 5 minute speech without burdening you with a little more, because I think there's like a sweet spot where we get up and we perform using other material, and once you start feeling what it feels like to be up on stage a little bit longer than the 1 to 2 minutes that I require for the speech of introduction, I think it's a little bit more comfortable to do your own material. So that's why I don't introduce another speech of preparation of your own material until the informative speech. So the narrative speech ideally will be somebody else's material. You can pick your favorite song lyrics. You can pick one of your favorite short stories. You can pick a poem. All of it works well with me. So go ahead. That's step one. Step two, okay, I want you to identify the organization of this. Okay, so if you look into chapter 3, it offers some it offers some kind of a little greater understanding of how narrative speeches are organized. So this is, I would like you to read this. So from pages 443 to 46, there are some elements here, and I want you to talk about these elements. Not everything you select is going to have these elements. So the example I typically use is Slick Rick Children's Story, and this is a song, but it's also a story, but it doesn't have quite the same elements as it does, but it doesn't have the same elements as some of your more traditional stories. It is interpreted for music. It is meant to be delivered via rap. Some poetry is definitely not going to have the same elements of a story, but I would accept that for the narrative presentation. To me, the narrative is not so much about teaching you how to construct a conflict, climax, and resolution, right? The story arc, so much as it is getting you to feel comfortable with being expressive up there and to practice your delivery. So the narrative is just the name that I give it for a lack of better name, but you can certainly do a poem. Some poems are so anticlimactic, right? And it requires the audience, especially in postmodern literature, the audience to put together the structure of the story from our experience with stories, right? I have a little daughter, and I'm starting to introduce her to stories, and she knows instinctively what a good story and what a bad story is. So the books that say 0+ or like for babies and on are like totally lame to her. She's like, these are whack. I'm not, the heck with this thing. She wants something with an actual story, something she can sink her teeth into. So step 2, identify the organization of your selected speech. Reflect on how the organization might work for the speech in front of an audience. So I have this every semester. A student will do something. So I'm going to use this this is not an example of an actual student's speech, but it's an example of how I've seen songs be presented before. I'll have somebody say, do this, the song that's very popular. One of the most popular songs is "Stand" by Mr. Marshall Mathers, the 17th, and the student will read it. They'll go through and say, "Stan, or Eminem, you really don't call or write my or whatever," and then they'll get to the chorus and they'll go, "Please don't call. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why. Raindrops on my window. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why." And they'll keep going back into that over and over and over again. Okay, that's not what I'm looking for. All right, I want some kind of, you know, I want something that makes it a little bit easier to digest. So even just reading all of the lyrics front to back and omitting those choruses is perfect. Unless you're really going to do justice to the choruses, don't do them. That's kind of my feeling. If you're not going to do justice to the choruses, I don't see a reason for you to have the choruses in there. So that's step 2. Okay, I want you to look at it, at your selection. Okay, I want you to look at your selection, and then I want you to decide if it's appropriate. I want you to write about that. Okay, the questions I ask. If it's a song, does the song make sense when it's spoken plainly? Does the organization require some reworking? Try taking this and thinking about this. Maybe read it to your friend, read it to your parents, read it to your aunts. Ask them, does this sound good? Does this make sense? Does the organization, okay, this is the structure of the speech. This in classical rhetoric, this is arrangement. Okay, does the arrangement make sense for the audience? Does the arrangement sound good? It might be excruciating to listen to. Please don't call. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why. Morning rain drops on my window. I'm wondering why. I'm wondering why. That's what it sounds like. It doesn't sound very good. So give it some thought. Okay, step 3. Okay, I want you to watch this video. All right. And then how does the storyteller transport the audience? What type of language does he use? So go ahead and pause this. Watch the video that I have pasted under the questions here. And pause it. And yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give a little explanation behind this, and this is the reason why I made this video. I wasn't going to make a video originally. Memory is very important for speaking. So there's 5 canons of rhetoric, and you'll hear this from me. This was what was important to the Romans. Okay. The Romans put together 5 canons of rhetoric. These are the 5 things that make good public speaking. You have style, okay? Invention. Invention is topic selection and writing and conceiving of arguments. You have delivery, which is what we're focusing on here with the narrative speech. You have arrangement, okay? Hold on, battery's running low. There we go. You have arrangement, okay? Arrangement is what we were just talking about, organization. How does the organization work and flow? Finally, you have memory, which is my specialty. I call myself a mnemotechnologist. That's that is my forte. I am into memory. I study memory. Memory was originally very important for speaking because for a lack of affordable paper, for a lack of affordable stone tablets, it was very difficult to deliver a 45-minute speech from stone tablets, or to afford paper, papyrus, really from the get-go, to put your words to paper. Paper was very expensive. It was a very time-consuming process. Try to make your own paper, and then try to write on it with the technology of the ancients, and you'll see just why memory was so important. Memory has been important for our entire civilization. Even now, to this day, memory is very important. You have to remember where you found things. You have to remember where you stored things. On your computer, even you're using your memory to remember where things are. Sometimes the search, like on Windows, I work on an Apple with my own computer, but I have a Windows computer for work. And the search doesn't help me at all. I have to remember where I put things, so I have to use organization. And organization is part of memory, okay? And that's crucial for public speaking. So I want you to think in terms of there's memory for you, for getting through your speech and being able to recite it without having to look down. All right. Then there's memory for your audience. Now, for an example of this, if you were to, so for example, typically I ask my students how many students have visited the Niagara Falls, and I'll get maybe 2 or 3 students to raise their hand. And that would be a problem if I were to begin my speech talking about my voyage on the Maid of the Mist, okay, and what it feels like to be in front of that waterfall. It's so much different standing on the boat platform, in the Maid of the Mist than it is standing. I don't even know if any of you have been to Bushkill Falls. We just went for a hike there with my daughter. To feel, what it feels like to be at the foot of Bushkill Falls versus the foot of Niagara Falls is so much different. It's such a drastically different place. There's nothing quite as sublime, right? And the idea behind this is if I'm an audience member to your speech and I don't have a memory of that, it's difficult to use that, right? So if I were to say to my audience, I want you to imagine the first time your child's sick, and none of my students have children, that's a problem. That's not going to work. So memory works both ways. If I'm going to use an image or use an example or use a word that does not pop up in the memories of my audience, they're going to spend a lot of time. My audience is going to spend a lot of time being confused and working through that. So instead, we want to use things that people are familiar with. I'm not going to say, the rush of, Tokyo traffic, morning Tokyo traffic. Instead, I could talk about New York City traffic. Many of you probably would know what it's like around the city, stuck in morning traffic, trying to get through the Holland Tunnel or something of that nature. You might have experienced it once in your life. But I have no prior experience with Los Angeles traffic. I can't understand what it's like to drive sitting in traffic just to get to the other side of the city and spend 2 hours in the car. That's not it for me, it's not processing. So you want to be very careful on the memories that you recall. This works both ways. So in step 2, I ask, how does the storyteller transport his audience and what type of language does he use? We talk about vividness. Memory or vividness comes out of memory studies from the ancients, right? So back in the day, right, in a lot of memory studies manuals dating back to the Middle Ages, we talked about a judge standing there with ram's testicles hanging from his third finger while his client is a sick man dying in bed, okay? Or they use testicles a lot as this. You have a ram with swollen testicles kicking the one of the defendants, okay? And this was used as a vivid image to help the audience understand how vivid imagery works. If I want to remember something, it's best that I use a vivid image as opposed to a mundane image, right? Mundane image. Waking up, eating breakfast, eating lunch, watching cartoons, eating dinner, going to bed. When you think back to your childhood, do you remember the mundane days or do you remember going to Six Flags Great Adventure? Do you remember the mundane days or do you remember 9/11? Okay? Do you remember the mundane days or do you remember when Kennedy was shot? Do you remember the mundane days, right? Or do you remember, your first time you rode on a Ferris wheel? Do you remember going to Point Pleasant and going to the boardwalk? Do you remember the first time you hopped off, walked out of Penn Station and saw the buildings in New York City? What do you remember? How vivid is it? And this vividness that we talk about in chapter 3 here, okay, vividness is what's going to help you convey your story. So, this semester, I want you to focus on that vividness. How do I get my audience into my world? What types of vivid language am I going to use to transport them? I need to bring them to my world, okay? So oftentimes I will use examples that are stupid, okay? Really super stupid, all right? And my stupid examples are so you guys remember the stuff that I'm saying, okay? When I, I'm probably, amongst my students somewhere known as the guy who talks about swollen ram's testicles. What a freaking crazy professor, man. And that's fine. But I'm using that to help you remember. I'm more likely to remember, okay, again, we're gonna come back to this. I'm more likely to remember the days that were vivid than the days that were mundane, right? I have sharper memories of things like getting into a car accident where I went into the windshield. That's more vivid than the days where I got to work safely, right? So that's step 3. Okay, I want you to focus on this video. I want you to watch what types of language does he use that helps transport the audience. Then finally, step 4. What examples of vividness are present in your material? Okay, before you do this, I want you to locate your narrative speech and identify the vividness located in your speech. And how might you work on incorporating more vividness into your speech? Can you take some creative license, right? Can you take a creative license with your speech and then go ahead and turn it around, right? And add something a little bit more spectacular to the speech that you're trying to deliver. So that's it. I would be remiss if I did not share at least once this semester the things that I'm actually really well versed in, which is memory, which is a big part of my study. So that was it. I don't know how much more memory I'm going to get to talk to you guys about, but that will be a central concept. It's not just about memorizing your speech. Memory is for the audience. You got to get that audience to use their memories. You can't take them to places they've never been. I can't make you feel heartbroken if you've never felt heartbroken. That's memory. If I talk about heartbreak, you're going to remember your own heartbreak. If I talk about the loss of a loved one, you're going to think about your grandfather who died, right? I can't make you have memories you've never had, and that's how it works. I can't make you experience something that you've never experienced. It just seems trivial if you've never experienced it, right? So that's it. Thank you. That's chapter 3. Please answer step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Step 1's not really answer. Just select your narrative speech, okay? All right. Thanks.